Welcome everybody to White Pass, Washington. Normally a ski resort. Today, however, it's going to be a review resort because we're going to take a look at today one of the, let's say, not so subtle movies of the early 2000s. We're going to talk about Windtalkers. The Japanese cracked most of the codes that the American implemented during World War II, so they came up with a new idea. They were going to insert Navajo Indians as their code talkers and use their language as their code. Because the Japanese didn't have any Navajo Indians, they couldn't crack the code because they were the only one who used them. And they would each be paired up with one person who would protect them. We'll get to that later. Now, our main character is Benjasi and Nicolas Cage. Benjasi is a Navajo Indian who wants to serve his country and be a radio code talker. Nicolas Cage wants to get back into the action after him, almost getting killed at Solomon Island, losing some of his hearing, and also him being a bit war damaged. Now they get paired up. Soon they're getting shipped off to Saipan, where they're gonna do war with the dug-in Japanese forces. But there is a twist to the whole thing. A wasted Chris Cooper performance is shoved in here when he is sort of the colonel, I think it was the colonel, who talks to Nicolas Cage in the beginning, and he informs him that his job is not to protect the code talker, his job is to protect the code. Should there be a risk of the code talker falling into the hands of the Japanese, his mission is to kill the code talker. And this is something that only he and a few other people know. Nobody else knows this in Cage Platoon, and definitely Benjasi himself doesn't know this. And this puts Nicolas Cage in a predicament. If he has to make the decision, is he gonna try to protect Benjasi, or is he going to try to protect the code? So, off to fighting, I suppose. Now, the first thing we need to talk about is that this movie is directed by John Woo, the walking embodiment of awesome. This is both a great benefit to this movie and also a great problem to this movie, because this is a terrible war movie. This is an awful representation of the Battle of Saipan. A savage, cruel, awful sequence of World War II when, murders of civilians jumping off cliffs, and Japanese who refuse to surrender, and torture and murder and all this horrible, horrible stuff. But John Woo makes this look like an awesome action movie, and it really is an awesome action movie. God, it's cold today. All the John Woo-ness is on display here. Slow motion, gratuitous violence, jumping in through the air and shooting. Not in the same way as he would do in his old Hong Kong movies, and not in the same way he would do in like a movie like Face Off. But it is still, his fingerprints are all over this one. Yeah, it doesn't really gives a good feeling of what the Battle of Saipan was really like, but I don't really care about that because I am a huge John Woo fan, and despite it being a little silly, and it has a bajillion plot holes, and it has all the war cliches you can think of, and all the stereotypical war characters you can come up with, it still works, at least for me. You have to reach out and take Woo, meet him halfway. If you can do that, you will have a blast. It could have been a better representation of the battle, yes, but it is still a really good and awesome movie. If you're refusing, you're gonna see the bajillion plot holes, and you're gonna have the hokey dialogue, and you're gonna point out that is stupid, that is stupid, that is so stupid, I want to go into head slapping mode. But we have another problem which is more difficult to swallow, and it is the fact that I don't like Nicolas Cage's character, and I'm not too fond of Benghazi either. Benghazi is a little annoying, and Nicolas Cage is really annoying. He basically has 3 modes. He has A, crazy, B, bitter, uninterested. It is a weird thing that goes around with him, and I don't really like him that much as a character, and I don't really care what happened to Benghazi. On the other side of the spectrum, we have sort of their mirror images. That is Ox, played by Christian Slater, and this guy, which I can't remember his name actually was, but there actually was they had a better relationship. They had a more interesting relationship. They had a story arc that was way more interesting, and I thought to myself, why couldn't we have them as our main characters? When I did care so much more what happened to them rather than Cage and Benghazi. And could we talk for a second about how the Japanese waged war? I seriously doubt that they were running down, straight up, yelling and going "ah!" and then being mowed down by Nicolas Cage with his "ah!" face and his Tommy gun, which seems to have unlimited supply of bullets. I think he reloaded once through the entire movie. Otherwise, it was just oh. So you're gonna have to stomach some of that. But the action sequences looks fucking gangbusters. They look amazing. John Woo just makes these amazing action sequences. He doesn't, edit them into shreds like blah, 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 blah. He really gives the sequences time to function, and it is epic, it is fantastic. But why, John Woo, did you have to insert actual war footage in your movie? It looks bad. It looks really bad. But seriously, John Woo, couldn't you have made just a CGI warship firing some CGI shells? It would have looked bad, but it wouldn't have looked as bad as inserting low quality actual war footage in a high quality shot movie, because the cinematography is great. It is absolutely splendid. Now the rest of the squadron that we follow around is your typical thing. The dumb redneck who's kind of a racist, the Italian guy, the guy from New Jersey, the guy who wants to get home to his family and show pictures of him. I hope nothing bad happens to him. And stuff like that. But actually they work. In some strange way they work. Maybe it is because John Woo believes that this character works. Therefore I believe that they work somehow. There are hokey dialogue, and well, you can't do that much about that. And the movie has a bajillion plot holes which you have to look through, except I will talk about one right here, right now. So this happens sort of in the middle of the movie, so it's not a giant plot hole, but spoiler alert! So they're going with this convoy with trucks, and all of a sudden they get, shot to bits, and they're, crawl throughout the way, and they're cornered in a field. They have Japanese in front of them and Americans in their back, and they're shooting at them from 2 sides because the American doesn't know that they are friendly. Their radio, apparently they only had 1 radio. Why do we need to have 2 radios? Ugh. Have been destroyed. What are they going to do? They're being bombed to bits down there. Now Benghazi points out that one of the Japanese actually kind of looks like him, and surprise, surprise, also has his clothes size. Who the fuck knew? So he and Nicolas Cage has this terribly great idea, which is strange, but they somehow get behind enemy lines, walk towards the base where the Japanese is shooting at them, with Nicolas Cage as Benghazi's prisoner. Now And their job is basically they're going to take over the Japanese radio, signal to the American radio, telling them that, hey, we're friendly, don't shoot at us, you idiots, and survive. And they do. There are so much to unpack here. One, how the hell could they walk all across to the backside of this place? It must have taken, you know, an hour if they want to, you know, really bypass the whole thing. Two, they must have had a password or something like that. You can't just waltz in and say, hello, I have a prisoner. You know, should we freeze this guy? Nah, sounds like work. Nope, don't think so. Second, I think that if, you know, a Japanese guy has, you know, taken an American prisoner, they're going to want to question him. They're not going to take him, you know, to the front line. They're going to take him to the back. So once again, whoopsie. And third, and then there is this thing with the radio. I don't know that much about, you know, how radios work. I'm not a radio expert or anything like that, but it looks like they're being able to find the frequency and, you know, talk to them and all that stuff. It goes really fast. Why would the American listen to an obvious enemy station telling them to shoot at a certain point? Because there's the enemy. Even though they're using the code of the Navajos, I strongly would suggest that they at least, you know, take a little bit to figure out, do we really trust this thing? Has our code being broken? That would be the first thing I would assume, at least. But I don't care about that, because this sequence is awesome and this movie is awesome, even though it is hampered by, you know, some problems. This movie shoots, stabs and burns itself into a much respectable 80 rating. Granted, this is an action movie, this is not a war movie. Remember that, remember that. It is entertaining, a little too long maybe, and it do have some problems, but in general this is a really awesome movie. So, what do you think about Windtalkers? Have you seen it? Let's see where we show up the next time, because soon we're gonna head off to Oregon, but I might squeeze in one or maybe even two reviews before we get there. But until then, next time, this is Victor and signing out.